Tonight's event is a great event. It allows us the opportunity every year to kind of reset priorities and kind of level set from a chapter standpoint on some of the goals we have for the year. And now that I'm in the private sector, government affairs capacity, many of you all in this room, on the corporate side of things, are used to year-end reviews, 2019 performance objectives and planning, realignment of teams. A lot of that stuff happens at the end of the year, early January. The same thing happens on the legislative and policy side of the House, right? So you think about last year's midterm elections at the federal level, as well as throughout the country. Then you have, beginning of January and February, you also have the convening of legislative sessions, particularly through the South. You also have the setting of budget priorities. And you also have the setting of goals, the realignment of teams from a committee standpoint, who are the new committee chairs, which party has power, that kind of thing. So I think it's within that context that I'd like to frame this discussion. And so that happens at the federal level, the state level, and also the local and municipal levels of government. And so what we want to do here with this panel is provide you with representation from every level of government. I've had the pleasure of having a relationship with the three individuals that are speaking to us tonight. I think two are here, one's on the way. But they have a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and we are very, very pleased to have them join us tonight. So it's with that, I'd like to introduce first State Representative Roger Bruce, representing District 61.
Yep.
Please come to the stage. Representative Roger Bruce has been in the Georgia General Assembly for, I think this is the 16th, 17th?
17th.
He was first elected back in 2002 and has been re-elected ever since. He represents the area of Southwest Atlanta, as well as South Fulton, the city of South Fulton, and Douglas County and Cobb County. He's a proud Morehouse graduate. And I know he's proud because I'm a Howard graduate, so that's probably the only time I would ever give a shout out to Morehouse graduate. But I think one thing that's interesting, as I was reading through these bios, I've known Mr. Bruce for a long time, but he had the opportunity when he was in college to work for former Atlanta Mayor Jackson at his law firm. And I think that speaks to the level of commitment and service that he has. He has a long, distinguished track record in the legislature. He has sponsored great legislation and has a particular interest in children, the aging, education, working families, etc. His accomplishments are too long to list. Leadership planning, had the opportunity to represent the Democratic Party and cast a vote for former President Obama. So we're just really, really, really honored and excited to have him here. That's Representative Bruce. Next, we have Atlanta City Councilman Matt Westmoreland, post 2 at large. Councilman Westmoreland is a member of the Atlanta City Council and is the vice chair of the Finance Executive Committee.
Yes.
He's also a member of the Community Development and Human Services Committee and formerly served on the Atlanta School Board in a variety of capacities, but also served as a legislative liaison to the General Assembly. On the school board, he oversaw a number of projects, capital-intensive projects, reallocating the budget, and has a number of concrete accomplishments during his time there. He attended Princeton University, where he was also the editor-in-chief of the Princetonian, which is the newspaper, the school newspaper there. And he's also taught for Teach for America, both for Carver High School and is a native Atlantan. So we're really excited to have him here with us tonight. Councilman Matt Westmoreland. And as Commissioner Hall here? Or-
She's on her way.
She's on, okay. Well, I'll briefly sketch her bio, and then when she joins us, we'll have her take us through on stage. But she's the Fulton County Commissioner for District 4, which includes the Old Fourth Ward, downtown Atlanta, Midtown, and the west side of Atlanta. She previously served as Chief of Staff to the late Joan Gardner, who used to be in that role for 6 years. So she served as Chief of Staff for 6, but she has over 25 years of experience in executive management roles. She's also the wife of former Atlanta City Councilman Kwanzaa Paul. And she's devoted her entire career to helping folks in need. So we'll be interested to hear what she has to say tonight. But it's within that context, I'd like to first toss the first question out to Councilman Westmoreland. As we all know, the Atlanta Super Bowl, the Super Bowl 53 is coming. And we'll be here within the next week. And so what I wanted to ask Councilman Westmoreland was, of course, we hear about the economic impact that the game will have on the city of Atlanta. But if you could kind of provide us with a little bit of context, I know you've probably been a part of a lot of those conversations, and in particular, from both the public safety standpoint, where it's the funding at the airport that we saw was so critical, to APD members, and also with the Super Bowl host committee. If you can talk about your work with the corporate community and all the different partnerships that it takes to kind of put on an event of that size and magnitude.
Sure, happy to. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be back with you and happy to talk about the world's biggest stage coming to Atlanta. This is actually our third Super Bowl. Atlanta hosted back in 1994. Can you all hear me all right? All right. Turn it up. There we go. Back in 1994 and 2000, this has been a 2-year planning process. After Atlanta won our bid, we actually sent a delegation to Houston 2 years ago, to Minnesota last year. That followed a $46 million bid that we sent to the NFL, trying to win the game that'll be here this Sunday. In the city's budget this year, we actually had a $10 million allocation specifically around security to make sure that this 10-day stretch goes off without a hitch. All of those investments lead to an economic impact that's going to be somewhere, depends on who you ask and what they're measuring, but last year in Minnesota, they saw a $370 million economic impact. Some of the forecasters here in the Atlanta area are predicting $400 million. So it's a really significant infusion here to the city. There are 40 agencies, federal, state, and local, that have been working together over the last almost 2 years to get ready. They were joined by 10,000 volunteers several weeks ago to get ready for this 10-day set of events. There have been different things popping up around the city. There are 30 murals that some of you have probably seen as you've been driving around, all painted by local artists through a partnership with Wonder Root. There are 10,000 trees that went up. The NFL paid to have them, Trees Atlanta partnership all across the city. You've probably seen during the shutdown 2 of our corporate sponsors, one, Coca-Cola. Admission to the Center for Civil Human Rights is free this week. Delta put up some money to make sure that folks could go see the MLK Historic Site back before we got our government back on track. MARTA is going to run for 24 hours, February 1st through the 4th. And probably one of the things that was giving the city the most heartburn is that the average day at Hartsfield, we see 75,000 folks go through our security line. The record so far is 96,000, and we are projecting 115,000 folks next Monday morning. So don't fly on Monday if you can avoid it. But if you have to be there, I have a lot of confidence in our general manager, and people feel really confident that we're ready and we're getting our snow and ice out of the way tomorrow. So it won't be a factor this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
That's good to hear. That was actually my quick follow-up. I worked for the mayor when the first set of snowstorms came through, and it was a nightmare, to say the least. So happy to hear about that. Turning now to Representative Bruce, I'd like to kind of at least frame this at a high level. We all saw the national race between our current governor and State Representative Stacey Abrams, as well as a number of legislative seats, particularly in the North Georgia area that ended up flipping, and that was capped by Lucy McBath, who obviously is now the U.S. representative at the congressional level for District 6. So wanted to ask you, as we start the legislative session, this is actually the third week of the legislative session, what types of leadership changes, if any, have you seen at the committee level? What in particular, from a leadership standpoint, with the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus have you seen? And then, are there any key issues or things that you're thinking about as we move on?
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me tonight. Am I on? Yep, I am. And thank you for allowing me to come and participate. As you said, that was a national campaign for a local position, basically. And but what ended up happening as a result of that campaign was that there are a lot of questions now about how fair is our voting system. And are our ballots, the process that we use to cast our ballots and count the ballots, is that a valid process? And as a result of that, there's probably going to be at least 25 or 30 different bills that will be introduced in the General Assembly dealing with voting, which is unprecedented to have that many. But I have one myself. How many of you live on one side of the county but work on the other side of the county and have to rush to get from one side to the other to be able to cast your ballot? And with today's technology, you should be able to go to any polling place within your county, give them your address, and they give you the ballot associated with your address. I am introducing legislation to make that possible on election day. Right now, we only do that for the early voting. And unfortunately, what they've done with early voting is they've cut down the number of places you can vote, but you can't go to any of those places. So I don't see why you should not be able to do that on election day as well. So that legislation is going to be dropped this week. And we'll hopefully that'll go through. One of the other pieces of legislation that I'm working on that I think is critical to probably people in the room, we have a budget of close to $26 billion. And that does not include the money that we pull down from the federal government. That is, money that is generated here in Georgia. And right now, less than 1% of that goes to minority-owned businesses. Which is pretty ridiculous in this day and time as well. And so a few years ago, we passed legislation that basically looked at the Department of Transportation and came up with a process for how they have to pick their, who they give contracts to. And now we want to extend that to every department in the state government, and to make sure that when we issue these contracts that they're issued fairly and that everybody in the state has a chance to participate in the growth and prosperity of this state. Georgia is growing at a rate faster than the whole country. And, but that's not for everybody in Georgia. That's for certain parts of the population. And so as I said, we want to look at how the contracts are vetted and make sure that everybody has a chance to participate.
Thank you. And one of the things I actually forgot to highlight from Representative Bruce's bio is that he's on these small business and job development committees. So
yeah.
That's one of the things I think that was relevant to this audience.
We didn't ask something? I just wanted him to repeat, Representative Bruce, so you guys know I'm on the board and he's my state representative. Can you repeat the amount of dollars that you just mentioned and then the percentage that minorities are not? I mean, what's the percentage again?
Our budget is typically close to 26 billion with a B, and we get less than 1% of that.
Less than 1%.
Yeah.
Less than 1%.
Yeah, and this is an issue we've seen at the federal level as well. I mentioned Cassius, who just joined us. When we were at SBA, we worked particularly on the contracting side of things to make sure that small disadvantaged businesses were getting a portion of the $400 billion that was spent annually by the federal government. So we see it at a number of different levels, and that's one of the things that Mayor Jackson is so instrumental in, as you all know, in making sure that more of a diverse base and pool of people were eligible and to apply for and receive contracts at the local level with the city of Atlanta.
And if I could speak to that, one of the things, and I've learned this from Manny, he and I were very close friends, and when he was putting the things together for that airport, it was structured in such a way that he made sure that people of color had a chance to participate. And I remember a particular instance where he was meeting with bank presidents. And at that time, there were no African Americans on any bank board at all. And his ask to them was to put some people on the board so that they would understand, the board would understand the difficulties that happened in our community that did not allow us to get the bonding and get the insurance and get the funding and get all of the things that you need to start your own business. And one of the presidents basically told him, well, you can't tell me who's going to be on the board of my bank. And his answer to that was, you're absolutely right, I can't. But Monday, I'm taking all of the money out of your bank that the city has in it until you get some people on that board. And that was his method. He didn't have a problem with using his office to further the interests of the entire city. If all of us do well, the city does well. And that was his position. And we need to have others who are in positions to force the issue of passing the wealth and sharing the wealth. We need people to force that issue.
Pivoting back to Councilman Westmoreland, and Representative Bruce will have a chance to chime in as well. Wanted to talk about former Atlanta City Councilman Ivan Young, who used to represent District 3 for a long period of time, but as many in this room know, passed away last year at the age of 56. He was a giant in the community. He was very instrumental in helping get the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium built, as well as a host of other projects on the west side of Atlanta. And so my question is, talk about, both of you, your relationship with him, the giant of a man that he was, and what do you see out of the new leadership? I know, and for a lot of you that may not know, his seat is open now in a special election. I think it's in March
19th.
Yeah, and there are a bunch of people that are running for that seat. So talk about the next wave of leadership and your thoughts on former councilman.
Yeah. So I got to know Ivory 4 or 5 years ago when I was on the school board. And we met. There were a number of schools back when the Governor Deal was proposing a state takeover of schools. APS actually led the state with 27 schools on that list in an effort that eventually failed. And so we were undertaking a number of efforts to make changes within APS to keep control of our schools and improve student outcomes. And Ivory was a really strong proponent of the work we were doing in the Washington cluster. He's a proud graduate, and he loved Fulton Elementary School, which we had turned into Hollis Innovation Academy, and we moved it into a building right in the heart of the neighborhood, and we brought in a new principal who got to pick a new staff, and there was some friction there, some controversy. And Ivory stood right by the school system and said, we need to do right by kids in English Avenue and Vine City. 5% of them at the time were reading on grade level at the end of 3rd grade. He knew that was wrong. And so that's how I met him. From a personal perspective, he wore trademark bow ties. He had a booming voice. He had a tendency to make 7 or 8 minute monologues during different committee meetings. He had a really wide smile, and he took 7 of us on council were new last January, and he really took all of us under his wing. And as a 31-year-old new to a body, I really appreciated that. From a policy perspective, Ivory really represented a district that is feeling the change that's going on in Atlanta, arguably almost more than any other council district. You're seeing it in Southeast Atlanta, you're seeing it in parts of Northwest, but English Avenue and Vine City and Home Park and West Midtown and down on into West End and Westview are seeing rapid change that is leading to a lot of displacement. And so when I look at the race to replace him, there are 10 folks running. There'll be an election on March 19th and probably a runoff in April. There are a number of really solid candidates. I served with one of them on the school board. I'm friends with another. Ivory's widow is running. And so we've got a lot of strong folks to choose from, but it's a really important district as we talk about housing affordability and equity and access to quality food choices. I mean, all of those are going to be really front of mind for the next couple of years for that district.
Bruce?
Yeah, I didn't have that much opportunity to interact with him from the position that I hold now. Because my district did not overlap with his at all. But I do know Ivory from, I used to be the president of University Community Academy, which was a school within his district. And I do remember all of the times that we called upon him for assistance and help. He was always there. He seemed to have a very strong affection for the kids. And, you know, when we asked him to come and participate in the different things that we were doing at the academy, he was always ready and able to be there. So that's my memory of him. Like I said, I did not have that much interaction with him from the State House and the city. We dealt with other people.
And so, you know, to the extent that you all can be engaged in that race, it's really going to add another voice to council, a new voice that's going to be paying attention to a lot of those issues. So really encourage you guys to do so. Piggybacking off of one thing, Representative Bruce, you were very instrumental in the creation of the city of South Fulton. Talk to us about that process, the genesis of it, what a heavy lift it was through multiple legislative sessions to get to make that a reality for those constituents, and to the extent that there are any future opportunities for the city of Atlanta and South Fulton to work together. Can you speak to those?
It was about 10 years to work through all of the different aspects of it. And it started out with Sandy Springs becoming a city. And what basically happened, you know, creating a city is supposed to be what we call local legislation, local people dealing with issues that relate to them. And you have delegations within the House and the Senate, and in this case it was the Fulton County delegation. But at the time that Sandy Springs wanted to become a city, the delegation was majority Democrat. And at that time, the Democrats did not want to create the city of Sandy Springs because it was going to dilute the amount of money going into the general fund that everybody could benefit from. So they kind of flipped the rules on us. And they said, well, yes, a local bill, but we're going to treat it like a general bill. And that's because they had the majority of the entire House, but not of our delegations. So that's what they did. They treated this local bill as a general bill, they passed it, and then what ended up happening, it backfired on them. Because there was a gentleman by the name of Senator Schaefer up on the north side of Fulton County that said that the north side of Fulton County was subsidizing the southern part of the county, and he didn't like that. So he came up with this idea that they were going to segment the entire county into pieces, and in those pieces, all the money raised in each of those pieces would stay in those pieces, so that whatever money they raised up there would not come south. And in doing that, what they in effect did was create 7 cities without a charter. They didn't know they were doing that, but that's the effect of what they had. And then what they found out is that they really weren't subsidizing the southern part of the county. The southern part of the county was subsidizing the north part. When you really got into the numbers, and that's what you guys do, right, Joe? Well, they got into the numbers and they realized that, well, wait a minute, the southern part of the county was actually subsidizing the northern part. And because of the way the law is written, it says that sales tax, the county collects the sales tax, and then they divide it up amongst the cities. But we were not a city. So $25 million a year that would have gone to the southern part of the county did not get there because we were not a city. it went into the general fund and we were subsidizing everybody else. So when we found that out, I said, well, we need to be our own city. We want that 25 million too, just like everybody else. And so we went on a journey. It became a difficult task and it evolved over a period of time. But one of the main reasons that I was pushing it so hard was because, you know, in our community, we did not have, like I said earlier, we did not have the ability to establish our own businesses because we couldn't get the bonding and the resources to do it. So my thought was that if we create this city that was going to be almost 95% African American, with 125,000 people in it, with a budget of about $60 million and an income of over 80 million. So we had a surplus. And the thought was that we would be able to put programs in place, establish an opportunity for people to be able to start their own businesses. Quite often you hear people say, I hear it all the time in South Fulton, that we have to have a Starbucks or we have to have Whole Foods. And I keep saying we don't have to have a Starbucks. What we have to have is a nice place where you can go get a cup of coffee and interact with people. But that could be Joe's coffee shop. That could be Sally's coffee shop. Or whoever. That could be somebody who lives there's coffee shop that provides the services that we think we're getting from all these other places. So that was what my motivation was, and the reason why I felt like we really needed to have a place as an incubator for minorities to be able to grow their own businesses. I get to a point, I bet you some of you in this room can relate to, in some of our communities, somebody passes away, we got to take up a collection to bury them, right? I don't want that anymore. I want us to be able to pass wealth on from generation to generation. And the only way we're going to do that is if we help each other and establish businesses that will flourish and grow as we grow this city. So that's where I am.
All right.
Thank you, Representative Bruce. That's a perfect segue. We have now with us Fulton County Commissioner Natalie Hall for District 4. And it's just a general question to kind of open things up, and I know we'll have some time for Q&A. Commissioner, I know Fulton County just passed the budget and looked at a number of different items and competing priorities. Is there anything you'd like to highlight or speak to as it relates to the budget, and as well as some of your personal objectives in your role?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. We just passed a $1.1 billion budget for Fulton County for 2019. We focused in a lot of the human services areas where there are the greatest needs in our county, such as homelessness, youth, seniors, HIV/AIDS, home repairs for seniors, home transportation for seniors. We use the vans. We have Uber and Lyft. They only have to pay $1, and we consider seniors anyone who's 55 and older. So that was shocking to me because I'll be there real soon. So we have put a $750,000 increase in the senior transportation, $2 million to upgrade our senior centers. We have senior centers all over Fulton County. Those centers have aquatic pools for therapeutic massage, therapeutic exercise. We have jewelry making classes, computer classes, field trips, and everything for our seniors. So $3.4 million was actually placed in the senior services budget. $500,000 increase in small home repairs for those seniors who need home repairs that they just don't have the income to pay for. I actually put an additional $1,500, and my colleague on the Republican side actually had the nerve to laugh. But our seniors want more field trips. They want to go more places, and I created a partnership with the Chick-fil-A College Football Hall of Fame, and their head of, their executive director, he wanted to partner, and he's going to actually do some senior field trips. A couple hundred seniors will be able to go there and have a nice time and have a free lunch. Over 1 million went to the Office of Youth. We have a problem with our youth in our communities. As a lot of you probably remember, we had the slider crimes in Southwest Atlanta. And once I heard that last year, I couldn't get it off my heart to try to figure out how we could address that. And so I asked for quite a bit of money to be put into the Office of Youth, over $1 million. Also, there are HIV/AIDS programs for treatment and testing that we needed, and I asked for $600,000 of that money to be put into the budget. That was also passed. So our budget is just going to really encompass every type of human service you can imagine, and we're going to actually put the word service back into Fulton County because things have been lacking for so much time. And from what I saw when I came back last year as the commissioner, they had cut so deeply into so many departments that the need had become greater than I could even imagine. And so I think that we passed a very significant budget to show that where our hearts truly are in serving the people.
And another quick follow-up question, I think, which touches upon all three of your roles, and we probably start with Representative Bruce, and then kind of if anybody else has something to share. But one of the things that's near and dear to all of our hearts is Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. As we all know, it's the busiest airport on planet Earth. Can you provide some perspective on what is happening in terms of these conversations about the airport? A lot of us have heard about a takeover, a study commission. And if so, if power is taken away from the city, ability to kind of oversee that operation, what kind of an effect will it have either at the municipal level or the county level on all the things that we love to do in Atlanta?
There's been several people that have talked about trying to legislate the takeover of the Atlanta airport. It hasn't gotten any traction at this particular point, and I don't think it really will. I know that I will be fighting it tooth and nail if they attempt to do that. But then there was talk about actually having another airport up in Fulton County, which really didn't get any traction either. But what you have are people who see that the airport is doing well, that we are, as you said, we're the busiest airport on the planet, which is why I think that I'm going to be honest with you, I really think that's why they lifted the ban up in Washington. They didn't want that airport to shut down just before the Super Bowl, and there was a whole lot of really upset people. But that doesn't mean they won't try to do something after the Super Bowl is over with. But I mean, I don't think it's going to get any traction. In fact, I'm almost positive it won't go anywhere during this session. And hopefully, you know, when the census is taken, and please, everybody, you know, fill out the census form and tell everybody you know to fill it out, because that's how they decide how this stuff happens. And but I think that there's going to be a lot of shifting with after this next census. And so I really don't think it's going to happen.
I'd like to speak on the census for a moment. This is something that's very important. A lot of us, well, my age and older may remember that when the census came through in the past, you were told to shut your lights off and hide and not answer your door. And so the census used to be seen as something that was not good, but that is the furthest from the truth that it could ever be. We need the census because it tells the federal government how much money we need to be spending down into our counties and our cities. And so at Fulton County, I completed a complete count committee, and every commissioner has to appoint 2 people from their district to this committee. And this committee of people will actually go out into every district within Fulton County, into those areas where it's hard to count, and they will get that count done. So we need all of you to make sure that you spread the word that everyone needs to complete that census so that we can get the federal dollars into the cities and counties that we need. And that money goes toward homelessness and other things that we really need.
And it decides how much representation you get.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think it's offensive that people are trying to take Atlanta's airport after William Hartsfield laid the foundation and Maynard Jackson and Andy Young built it. I agree with Representative Bruce that I don't think, between the speaker's comments and the governor just not wanting that fight, and it would be a fight.
It'd be a big fight.
You're not going to take the biggest economic development driver in the Southeast that the city built with no help from anybody else. And then we got a president who's at every turn trying to undermine and disenfranchise large segments of the population, which makes this census way more important than any other one we've had in a while. To your question, I think the vast majority of folks who work for the city of Atlanta, contracted with the city of Atlanta, appointees of the city of Atlanta, are good, honest, ethical, transparent folks. I was on the school board, and I felt the same way over there. And we had some actions that were taken back in 2007, 8, and 9 at APS that tarnished the reputation of the organization, and we had to fix some things. I think the same is happening now. I think there have been some irresponsible and inappropriate actions by a very small number of people that have caused the public to lose some trust and confidence in their government. And so I think you've seen Mayor Bottoms take a number of steps. We passed a credit card policy on Tuesday unanimously by council that her office introduced to significantly tighten up rules so that we don't have a repeat of the stories that we saw in the AJC and Fox 5 and WSB all throughout 2018. We've moved online. We moved our entire procurement process online so that everything is submitted electronically. We had some instances where pages of proposals would go missing, sometimes somewhere between when they were given to the city and when they were being considered. And so we're removing that possibility from happening in the future. And then most recently, 10 folks on council, myself included, co-sponsored legislation on Tuesday to create what's at least conceptually the third leg of a stool. So we've had an audit office for a while. Mayor Franklin instituted an ethics office back in 2002. And now we're beginning to have conversations that Mayor Bottoms actually talked about during her campaign as well around an internal compliance function. Some people call it an inspector general. The bottom line is, how can we be proactive in minding our own shop and making sure that we're doing everything on our end so that things like this don't happen in the future and people look at the city with a black eye when I think that nearly everyone is acting appropriately. And we need to put some safeguards in place to make sure that things that have happened don't happen again, just like Mayor Franklin did back in 2002 and 2003.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jay Wesley with the Mary Parker Entrepreneurial Empowerment Summit and president of the Atlanta Nightlife Alliance. Matt, the city of Atlanta has extended the nightlife hours for this entire week of the Super Bowl, which is estimated to put a $1 million contribution back into economic growth in the city that you referenced earlier, specifically for the hospitality industry. Has the city considered extending nightlife hours permanently to be more competitive to attract conferences, organizations, and tourists over our competitor cities such as DC, Miami, Chicago, New York, or Las Vegas, who all have longer nightlife hours than Atlanta?
Yep, no, it's good to see you again. I think so I voted for, supported, Marcy calls it 4204. Marcy Overstreet's a colleague of mine on council who introduced this legislation yesterday. And, back in my day, I used to love going to Mother and El Bar and different spots till 2:30, 2:45 in the morning. Not so much anymore. There's a balance here. I'm totally in support of what we're doing this week. I think it's great to provide an atmosphere for people to have fun. I got an email yesterday from a bar owner on the Edgewood Corridor saying, this makes me nervous because, dicey things can happen between 3 and 4. We're 350 cops short in the Atlanta Police Department as it is. We can talk about that in a second with raises and recruitment and retention and all that. But, I think there are people who want to stay open, and then there are people, including folks who would actually stand to make money, who want to make sure that we're thoughtful and careful in creating a safe environment, which led to the hours being rolled back from 4 to 3 way before I started drinking. And so I'm trying to be sensitive to both. I want to see how this week goes. What we hear from proprietors and what we hear from people who are engaging in partying. I want everyone to have a good time, and I want everyone to do it safely, and I want to do it in partnership with business owners and patrons. So let's chat in a week, and we can see how it went and what makes sense for the future.
Can I say something on that too?
Yeah.
Not on that exactly, but at the state level, there was an issue about Sunday sales of alcohol. And last session, we changed it to allow you to get your mimosas a little early in the morning. And it was for the same reason, And I'm not a drinker, but my wife, she wants some mimosas.
Thank you. Yes, gentleman in the back.
Yeah. Chaz Jenkins. So earlier you talked about minority businesses and the, contracting process and getting, a bigger piece of that. Is there a program that maybe exists that we don't know about that can help would-be entrepreneurs into that pipeline and process?
Can I speak on that? I want to just first talk about small nonprofit organizations. Fulton County has 2 grant programs that you can, and I see you pulling out your phone and taking notes. We have a process called Contract for Services, where we give money to nonprofit organizations that deal with homelessness, youth, seniors, economic development, and the like. And we also have a program that is for arts nonprofits that we give grants out. And they're 2 separate programs. They generally start the application process in the fall, around September. And if you want more information about that, my team is here. They have my business cards. Anita Harris right there in the front, raise your hand. Calvin Bragg over there in the corner, raise your hand. And if you wanted more information on how to do that, I would be glad to connect you, because we've also increased that budget as well. As far as small businesses and entrepreneurs, a lot of people don't know that Fulton County does have an SBA office as well. And so there are opportunities there. And I actually met with Ashley Bell. He is the administrator for the SBA, the US SBA. And we're trying to do some things in Fulton County in partnership with them as well.
And in addition to that, I'll jump in real quick. At the municipal level, I would check out the Mayor's Office of Contract Compliance. There are some requirements for minority firms and women-owned firms that you should familiarize yourself with. So every contract that the city lets, there's going to be a piece that's allocated toward those 2 groups. On the federal side of things, you should look at the 8, the number 8, the letter A. That stands for the part of the Small Business Act, the 8A Business Development Program. It's a 9-year business development program that if you're accepted into, you work with the SBA district office as well as a small business specialist to build your business and look for contracting opportunities with the federal government. And I can provide you with a wealth of information on that after. But to the broader point to everybody in this room, if you are a small business owner and you sell your products and services to a corporate entity like Coca-Cola or McDonald's, whatever you sell, you should always think of that as, from a business development standpoint, as something that you could actually sell to the government at every level, right? There are different accounting requirements involved in terms of being a steward of taxpayer dollars once you're allocated with that money, but I see a lot of businesses that just focus on the Coca-Colas of the world, or on the converse side of things, when there's a government shutdown, you heard about the contractors that weren't getting paid. If you expanded your, scope in terms of what you were going after, you could have had contracts on the corporate side of things. So it's a business development tool that I highly encourage folks to look at, especially if you're looking at expanding your business, expanding your operations, that kind of thing. I can provide more information or Cassius as well, and any of the panelists, if you're interested.
Thank you all for being here. My question is centered around business as well. Representative Bruce, this is more for you. I just finished reading Building Atlanta, H.J. Russell's book, and it seems now we're talking a lot about small businesses. I'm a small business owner. My friend here, she's a small business owner. I've been in business 6 years. I have 4 employees. And we hear a lot about the contracts that are available, but every time you go to the meetings, you're a certified business, local, state, federal, the contracts just don't seem to show up. Especially with Black women. Right now, we make up the largest part of what's growing in terms of business, but we're only generating about $28,000 a year in revenue. And so typically, Black-owned businesses, we're in business, but we're not making money. And so I'd like to hear some suggestions and keys you have around that. Again, for going after the contracts, for meeting the OSTA booths, small business owners, getting certifications, but what other additional information can you provide? Thank you.
As I said, that's part of what this legislation is about, is to do the various studies to find out where the opportunities exist. I know they exist because if we only get less than 1% of the current budget, I know there's opportunities. There's plenty of them. But, I wanted to say this a little earlier too. We have to be careful not to put all of our eggs in one basket. I don't think it's a good idea to depend too heavily on government contracts. If you get them, that should be great. And what we have to do is start, educating each other into doing business with each other. People laughed at me when I was putting the city of South Fulton together. One of the things I kept saying is that we have to think out of the box. We've got 125,000 people in that city. And I know this is going to sound crude, but it'll prove the point. There's one thing that every one of those 125,000 people have in common. They all use toilet paper. Right? I hope. What if we were to start our own manufacturing company in South Fulton that made toilet paper? You got 125,000 people, customers right off the bat, right? Hopefully. But then, to your point, every building that you go into, they got toilet paper there too. So if we can, and we're in a building that makes toilet paper, I think. But the point is, if we were doing that, we would have a built-in customer. And I just use that as an example, but there are other things too, products and services, that if we would just do business with each other and help each other as we go forward, we would not be as dependent on the government as we seem to be. The government should be gravy. That should not be the meat.
And one additional point to kind of close this out, as a resource for the city of Atlanta, has the Women's Entrepreneurship Institute. It's run by a lady by the name of Thea Washington. Okay, yes, good friend of mine, and if you're synced up with them, that'd be great as well. There are a couple other entities I can give you offline that may be additional resources. And the county as well. The county, I know it's off the top of my head, but do you, Commissioner, do you know the name of the resource at the county level?
You can just go to our website at fultoncountyga.gov and go to the purchasing department, and they have an entire page. There are classes that you can take and everything. They'll help you through the process, especially as a minority and a female business. We just recently completed a diversity study, and we'll have someone come to our BOC meeting and actually give us an update on that diversity study.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm glad the Commissioner was here. My experience has been the city and the federal level, so she helps close the gaps as well, so thank you for that. Additional questions?
Yeah, thank you. So, I'm a money guy, so I think about that. I'm all for entrepreneurship. But one thing that we know is that one of the challenges for entrepreneurship is access to capital, especially in those early stages, right? So, those first couple of rounds, usually the family and friends around, but historically speaking, demographic in here, you know, you don't have a buddy you can call up and say, hey man, can you give me 50 grand? Or, you know, a rich uncle give $1 million to start this out. So is there, I mean, not necessarily this may not be the government's role, but is there anything that you guys are doing to help address that problem as far as access to capital? I understand SBA, but even the SBA, you have to be at a certain level before you can really get access to that, which is where a lot of early stage companies die, you know, because they're undercapitalized. So I didn't know if any of you guys know anything that you may be doing here locally to help address that problem.
Yeah, so Randy Hazelton had an event at the Gathering Spot a couple weeks ago with John Sullivan, the new airport GM. And someone asked John that question, and he said, I don't believe that the airport should be giving out capital, but Councilman Westmoreland, you want to take that one and see what you can come up with? And so this is, and this woman who spoke earlier, I wanted to come find you afterwards and would love to hand you my card as well, or I just give all of you my cell phone number. But I'd love to, I'll just do that. If you'll text me at 404-408-0980, I'd love to chat about what the city can do, but more than that, how the city can help other people come up with things like that. I think that's a really cool idea.
There's also an organization called ACE, and and interestingly enough, ACE is a non-profit company that was set up to help people like yourself to get funding for their business idea. And I can give you contact information after we get through.
And I want to add to that.
And we're running out of time, so this is the last time.
Quickly, yeah, I'm sorry about I have a cold, but I want to add to this.
408-0980.
So we also have an entity called the Black Angels Fund. I'm in the private space as well, speaking of venture and all that. But also two representatives, Bruce might be able to help us out because the state of Georgia has a program that's called the Invest Georgia that really is kind of limited. They really don't do anything in the minority space, but it is there for them to be able to invest in small companies. As I think with this new administration coming in, and we can work across party lines, we should be able to get more people at the table to look at that. It's called Invest Georgia. They do have a consultant. They get all these firms to allow them to come in and to get the money, but we're not at the table. So if you want to speak to anything.
Well, that's part of what this legislation is all about, is to make sure we have a seat at the table. And then not only just have a seat at the table, but also to be able to participate in the things that are going across that table.
Right.
So unfortunately, it doesn't exist now, but we're working on it to try to make it happen.
I'm getting the hook here.
I just wanted to make a comment about the contracts and what I'm saying. A lot of times people think there's not enough minority contractors, but we are here. I've been in business 18 years. I'm an electrical contractor, and I'm a journeyman wireman and IBW, and I'm at the multi-million-dollar level. And what I want y'all to know is the minute you get that contract, they working to take it from you. You have to have a tight contract. You got to have a tight legal team, because contract compliance can't help you if you have agreed to things that are against your best interests. And Montia, my friend, she's not been in we feel like we always in a fight, but you got to make sure that your documentation is tight, your project management is tight, and so it's not enough to get certified and get the contract. You got to perform, and you got to have the necessary people in place to help you defend your contract, and they got to know you're ready to defend it, that you're not going to cave in and give up whenever they tell you something. If it ain't in your contract, don't listen to it. So I want to encourage people to get certified, but because I just got certified like 2 years ago, but because I wanted to compete as a majority, so for the most part, they didn't even know I was a woman. But once they knew, they thought they were going to push me around, and they found out it was another story.
Apply, because as a commissioner, one thing that I've noticed over my first year in office is that every time a contract comes before us to vote on it, and my colleagues ask the question of where is the minority and female business participation, it's always told to us that not many of those companies are applying. So please apply.
And thank you, Councilman Westmoreland, Representative Bruce, Commissioner Hall for joining us tonight. Can you give us more?